Good morning and welcome back to the Planet Doug podcast. Though I'm not quite sure what to call this yet, it gets a little bit confusing because I'm calling it a podcast because it's audio, but it's still kind of my journal, but it's also the behind the scenes of Planet Doug. So I don't really know what to call it. Sometimes I call it a Planet Doug podcast. Sometimes I call it the Planet Doug audio journal. But then it's also the Planet Doug Audio BTS. Anyway, I guess over time I will settle on a particular name and an identifier. And of course, since this is a part of Patreon, on Patreon, what I've been doing, and as I've been talking about, I've been creating types of content, and then within Patreon you can assign that type of content to a collection. You see that all over the internet, if any kind of an archive or organizational site, and sometimes they call them albums. Like if you have a photo site, you can group photos together into an album, or you can put albums together into collections. Like every site has its own terminology, and Patreon has chosen collections. So you can make a whole bunch of similar posts and then put them together into a collection. And that's what I've been doing. So right now I have what I call the Planet Doug podcast collection. And that's where this audio recording is going to go. But it could just as easily be a Planet Doug audio collection or Planet Doug audio journal collection. I'm not quite sure what's the best way to go. Probably audio journal, because that is most close to what it actually is. Yeah, that's probably what I'm going to land on eventually, but it's just something that will evolve over time. Anyway, I didn't give the date yet. This is a Sunday, November 17th, 2024, just after 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm sitting on the bed inside room 19 at the Malahayati Hotel in Tanjung, Balai. And the reason I'm still here in Tanjung, Balai, there's an interesting story there, an amazing story, and a big change in my upcoming short-term plans. And I'll talk about that in a minute when I get to that section. First thing on my mind, of course, which is often the case, is technology, because I'm also experimenting with different ways of recording audio. And right now, I'm using the Rode Wireless Go 2 microphone as a standalone recorder. So I just have it attached to the top of a selfie stick, basically a grip. I have it hooked onto a grip, and then I'm holding the grip so as to hold the microphone up near my mouth. And I'm speaking directly into the Rode as if it's sort of a studio microphone, like I'm Bob Barker or somebody like that, holding a microphone and talking into it. But the thing is that Rode recently released a firmware update for the Rode system. And for some reason, when I saw the news about this firmware update, I thought it was a brand new update. So I got very excited about it. But then I started seeing a lot of stuff on the internet saying that this update was a year old. So now I'm confused because it seems odd that I would miss such an important update for over a year and not be aware of it. So maybe this is actually a brand new one. Maybe there was an update a year ago and this is a new one. I'm not sure. But anyway, I've been doing a deep dive into the features, and they've improved it a lot. I talked about this already last time, that the biggest change, and the one that's the most useful to me, is that the Rode can now serve as a simple USB drive, meaning that you can plug it into anything and gain access to the contents. So you can just plug it into your computer, whatever type of computer you have. If you've got a Mac, just open up the Finder, is that what it's called? Yeah, maybe the Finder, yeah, and just click on the Rode as a USB portable drive, and it opens up all the audio recordings, and then you can copy and paste them, do whatever you want with them. Before this update, you only way you could do it was through the Rode app, and the Rode app had to export each audio file one by one. So the audio was not easily accessible as a WAV file or an MP3 file or anything like that. You had to export them all, and then the Rode app had to basically create the audio file for you, and it was a long, involved process. But now Rode has added the ability, so you can plug it into your laptop, plug it into your smartphone, into your tablet, and then open it as a drive, and then you just see all the audio files. Then you click on them and play them or copy and paste them. I assume you can delete them that way as well. I haven't tried that. I was a little bit worried that if you delete them as a USB drive, somehow that causes problems because you haven't officially deleted it through the app, and maybe there's some remnants in terms of the naming system or something. I don't know. But I'm in theory, I think you can delete them one by one from the USB drive. Because that is the one limitation inside the Rode app. Well, there's several limitations, but the one that really seems weird to me, and I thought the update would fix it, is that you cannot delete individual recordings. It seems like it would be such a simple thing to do, because just this morning, getting ready for recording this journal, I plugged the Rode into my laptop, and the laptop I have here, as I talked about, is an Asus VivoBook. And I don't use it for video editing. It can't edit video, basically. I just use it for administrative tasks. I'm still editing video on a smartphone, and I mention that because it ties in with my Planet Doug story about my change in plans, a very exciting change in plans coming up in a few minutes. But I plugged the Rode into my laptop, and then I opened it up with the Rode Central app, because I wanted to play around with some of the settings, and then I double-checked because there were like 15 audio files recorded, and it occupied about 4 hours worth of memory. So what I wanted to do was save some of the smaller audio files that I still wanted to keep, but I wanted to delete yesterday's or the day before's audio journal, because those are huge files and I don't need them anymore. So I wanted to just select these big audio files and delete them. But you can't do it. The only thing you can do on the Rode app is either leave them all or delete them all. You can wipe out the memory and delete everything, or you can leave it there and delete nothing, which is so strange to me. In the listing of audio files, you can actually click on each audio recording and select it, so I could select one of them, or I can select 5 of them, or all of them. But once you've selected them, you can't delete them. The only thing you can do is select them for export. So you could do a batch export now, but you can't do a batch delete. You can't delete a single file. All you can do is delete all of them or delete none of them. And when I stare at that, again, it makes me wonder about these companies, like technology companies. I wonder about the process that leads to that, because to me it seems like such an obvious thing. To me it's like a door company making doors, and yet somehow the door doesn't have a doorknob. At some point in that company, someone's going to notice. They're down at the assembly line even, and someone's going to raise their hand and go talk to management and say, by the way, do you know the doors we're making don't have doorknobs? Are you aware of that? And then, of course, they're going to fix it, and they're going to put doorknobs on them. They're going to stop production, and, hey, boy, we better fix this. But technology companies constantly release products that are missing features and abilities that, to me, seem as important as doorknobs. This ability to delete individual audio files seems like such a no-brainer to me. How in the world can you miss that? So what I'm thinking is that there must be a technological reason why that's impossible to do. Or they made a cost-benefit analysis and says, okay, we can add this ability, this feature, but it's going to take 5 software programmer, engineer dudes 2 months nonstop work in order to build this feature, and we don't have enough customers asking for it, so we're just not going to bother. I mean, that's the only explanation I can think of. Or somehow the way the technology works, this just can't be done. That for some reason, this is like a door, and because of its physical design, it can't have a doorknob. And for some reason, the way the Rode Wireless Go microphones work in terms of the software and the hardware, you cannot delete individual files. Like, it physically cannot be done, and that's why they haven't added that feature. But that just seems so weird to me. But I would like to know the reason for one of these no-brainer features that seems so obvious to me, why it doesn't have that feature. There has to be a reason for it. It can't be an oversight. They're not dummies over there at Rode. They know what they're doing. I'm not exactly a genius, and when I open up the Rode microphone, the first thing I want to do is delete audio files. I mean, I'm not a genius, and I see it right away. It's like, oh, what? I can't delete audio files individually? That's weird. Why can't I do that? I mean, just think about it. Imagine if on your computer you have a folder and there's 20 pictures inside the folder and you want to delete 2 of them, but you can't do it. That somehow in Windows they won't let you delete 1 picture or 2 pictures. You can either delete all of them or none of them. You would look at that and go, well, that's dumb. Obviously, I'd want to delete 1 or 5. I want to choose which ones to delete. It's just obvious. And yet on the Rode, as far as I can tell, I mean, I guess I should put in a disclaimer there. I am a dummy after all. But I looked everywhere. I mean, I highlighted a whole bunch of them. And then I hit the delete button, the backspace button. I looked all over the Rode app looking for a delete option. But there's no menu system. There's no buttons, there's nothing, so you can't delete them. All you can do is, there's an export button, so you can export them after you select them, but that's all you can do. You can't rename them, you can't delete them, but I'm assuming that now with the USB feature, you can delete them one by one. So I guess that kind of makes up for it. But anyway, just a weird little side note there about technology companies and why these very obvious features don't exist. And if you're talking about what was I going to say? I've just had I looked at something on my phone and then I lost my train of thought. Maybe it will come back to me. Oh, I just remembered tally light. Like if you're talking about a vlogging camera, Sony comes out with a new camera and they have a huge marketing campaign about how this is the ultimate vlogging camera. It's perfect for the content creator out there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I get my hands on the specs for one of these cameras, and me as a quote unquote content creator, I can see 10 features right off the top of my head that camera does not have, that it must have in order to be a camera for content creators. Simple things like the one I mentioned, a tally light. That is the simplest, cheapest, most obvious thing, that if I'm recording video on my camera and I'm aiming the camera at myself, I need a light, a flashing red light at the front of the camera to tell me it's recording. Again, no genius here talking into this microphone, but it's the most obvious thing in the world to me. And that is one area where action cameras are miles ahead of the big camera companies, because they get it. Action cameras aren't even supposed to be content creator cameras, yet they are still the best content creator cameras on the market, by far. And I don't know how that worked out, because they're action cameras. They're designed to go skiing and surfing and skydiving and skateboarding. They're designed for that. When they first created, like the very first GoPro, nobody was thinking, oh, these are going to be great for YouTube. They weren't designed for that, and yet by accident or by design, they turned out to be the best cameras for content creators. And just for simple reasons, because a content creator like me, the features we need are the obvious ones. We need the camera to be small. We need it to be lightweight. We need it to have incredible stabilization. We don't want to worry about focus. And we need things like tally lights. And a GoPro, an action, DJI Action, all of these action cameras, they all have those features. They're small, they're lightweight, they have perfect stabilization, they have infinite focus, and they have things like a tally light. And it's just such a no-brainer. And they have a screen on the front where you can see the video. Well, the Action can do that. It has playback. Well, yeah, GoPro, of course, does it too. When you're recording video, you can see the video on the back or the front all the time. You don't have to flip out the screen and face it forward and have this obtrusive screen sticking out to the side of the camera, the flippy screen. So yeah, it's just weird that these big companies, and I always picture these meetings there, design, production meetings, and there might be 20 people in a room discussing their new advanced $1,200 Sony content creator camera. And then not one person in that room timidly raises their hand and says, excuse me, I've heard from Doug, the content creator, the famous content creator on Planet Doug, that a tally light is very useful. And like nobody ever brings it up. Like, what, do these people get shouted down? Like, boo, we don't like tally lights. And again, it seems like such an inexpensive feature. I was just looking at a review of another dedicated vlogging camera online. I can't remember which one it was or what company it was from. But again, they went on and on and on about how it was designed to make shooting video easier and better for content creators. But they still maintained the photography-centric design of a giant button in the perfect position for taking pictures. So there's the shutter button for taking pictures. And then way off to the side, there's this tiny little red button that is recessed into the body of the camera. And that's your video record button. And again, I'm thinking, okay, if you're going to try and sell me this as a video-centric camera, well, switch them around, or at least make the video record button nice and big. Make it tactile. Make it easy to use. But they make, I mean, so many times cameras I've used, I'm trying to start the camera to shoot video, and I can't find the button. So I'm like I'm in the dark because I'm holding the camera up to my eye sometimes, and then I'm feeling around with my finger trying to find the button to start recording video, and I can't find it because it's recessed into the camera body, and I'm feeling around, and then I have to remove the camera from my eye, look at the camera, oh, there's the button, put my finger on it, and then put the camera back to my eye, and that's absolutely ridiculous, and yet that's the way they make video cameras. So yeah, very, very strange. These companies, these technology companies. We'll see whether, if I could jump ahead in time 20 years, I'd love to do that and see whether Sony or Nikon or Canon, whether anybody has ever figured this out and actually produced a good vlogging camera. I mean, how many decades is it going to take? I won't be on the planet anymore. Planet Doug will be no more by the time they actually get around to making a good vlogging camera. Yeah, anyway, technology rant over, I guess. I guess I started with the Rode and just talking about how, yeah, to this day, using the Rode app, you still can't delete audio files. It's so strange to me. I have I mixed up my topics a little bit. I moved my YouTube stories up on my list, mainly because I want to talk about Planet Doug things a little bit later. So for YouTube stories, I only have one story, there's one channel that I'm very interested in right now. That is the one I mentioned before. There's a Canadian, oh boy, I never even looked up his name actually, but his channel is called Moto, which I believe is Spanish for one motorcycle. Moto. And I don't know why he chose a Spanish name, but that's what it's called. He's from he's from British Columbia. I think his hometown is Abbotsford. And I was talking about him the other day, and I'm more and more and more fascinated by this guy. And he seems like, in so many ways, such a kindred spirit in everything he talks about, his experiences. And he's just clearly just a nice guy. He's just a nice Canadian boy in his 30s, perhaps. I think that's how old he might be. And I went back in time and I watched all of his prep videos, because the first video I saw on his channel, well, it seemed to be, I thought it was the first video, because I always like to start at the very beginning. So when I went to his channel, I went to video number 1 and I watched that one, or at least number 1 in the list. And it was the video about him leaving home on a motorcycle to go around the world. So that was where it started. But then it turns out there were actually like 5 videos came before this one, because I guess he uploaded them all at the same time. Like he did sort of he had all these videos. And yeah, again, YouTube is another one of these companies that drives me crazy, because there are so many obvious features I want in their studio program to manage videos, and they don't exist. And one of them is it's nearly impossible to put videos in the correct order. So this guy, Moto, he uploaded, I think, 6 videos all at once. So they just sort of ended up on his channel in a weird reverse or mixed up order. So now when I look at his videos, they're not in the proper chronological date order, or even in the order of how he numbered them, because he borrowed an Itchy Boots approach where he has a season and an episode and an act. He's made it pretty complicated, I think, but it's like season 1, episode 1, act 1, or something like that. So he's got this numbering system, but the way his videos show up on his channel, they don't follow that numbering system. And within YouTube itself, you can't reorder them. There is no way to just pick them up and drag them around and put them in the right order. You can if you make a playlist, but in your main video feed, how you upload them, that's the order they're in. And you can't move them, you can't change them, you can't change the order. And that is always, I guess I can understand how that would be a tremendous programming challenge for YouTube to say, okay, let's implement this ability. The scale of YouTube, the size of it, and the program they must be working with, it would probably take them 2 years to finish reprogramming to give us that ability. But again, YouTube does bother me in particular, because almost every day I wake up to an announcement from YouTube about some great new feature for you content creators. Here's this amazing new feature, and they have podcasts about it, they have videos about it, they have tutorials about it, they have advertisements about it. But all of these features that they keep giving me, I don't want any of them. They just say, oh, we have this amazing new feature, here it is. And I look at it and I'm going, well, that's pointless. I don't want to do that anyway. And all these things that I actually want to do, the features I would like, they never actually work on those features. So I guess maybe I'm an outlier. Maybe I just want things that the average YouTuber doesn't want, but I don't think so. I think every YouTuber on the planet would love the ability to reorder the videos, because I've done it myself. I've posted, this happens all the time, I'll post a video, it's now on YouTube, but I don't want to make it public right away because I want to post another video before that one, but that video isn't done yet. So my videos end up being uploaded out of order, and then I post them chronologically because I can decide exactly when they go public, But then when you look at my YouTube feed, those videos will all be out of order because they are put in the order in which they were uploaded, and you can never change them after that. You can't change the date, you can't move them around, and that is an ability I'd really, really like. But anyway, another tangent there to say that his videos were out of order, and then I went back and I watched his prep videos, and I found them really fascinating because he talked about, for example, what he wants to do, and what he wants to do is ride his motorcycle around the world. And if I can go off on a tangent again, I'm nothing if not full of tangents, but I've come across this my entire life, because even before YouTube, for as long as I can remember, I've been thinking about people who travel around the world, reading travel books, National Geographic, just travel stories of any kind. They've always been on my radar, and I've always been interested in them. And I've developed this idea that people make a mistake when they're planning because they don't really understand what traveling is like or what traveling is all about. So they've never, let's take some random person, just as an example, some person who's never been outside of their hometown, never left their own country, and they've been inspired. They want to go see the world, and they come up with a plan. And what they always do is decide to go around the world. And then they take out a map, and they start drawing a line from their hometown, from their home country, and they draw this line that goes around the world in a circle all the way back to where they started from. And that is their idea. Okay, I want to experience the world. I want to learn about the world. So let's go around the world. And then they come up with this huge plan that takes them around the world. And I always end up feeling, well, that's not the most efficient way of going about it, because you're going to too many countries, for one thing. It's like, why do you want to go to 50 different countries? And then when you put 50 different countries together in one journey, all you've done is enter the country at one side of the border, cross the country through the middle in a straight line, and then you exit out the other side. And that's all you've seen. What about all the rest of the country to the north and to the south? You missed all of that. And because you're going such a long distance and you're going to so many countries, you spend all your time traveling, and all you see is the road ahead of you. And you see the edge of the road to the left and the edge of the road to the right, and that's it. And you miss all the rest of the country. So there is an argument to be made that, say, if you want to go, say you want to go to Africa, I want to experience Africa, you can argue that, well, you are better off going to one country, spending 6 months in that one country and traveling to every region of that country, instead of drawing a line from Cairo to Cape Town. Because again, for Africa, that's what everybody does. They think, oh, I want to go to Africa on a bicycle or a motorcycle, and everybody does Cape to Cairo. Because on a map, that looks like the obvious thing to do. Start in the north in Cairo, and then ride all the way down to the southern tip of Africa in South Africa, Cape Town. So it's Cairo to Cape Town, and it has alliteration as well, so it gets very exciting. You look at that line you drew on the map, it looks very exciting. I'm going to see so much of Africa. But in the end, maybe you could have been better off just saying, okay, I'm going to spend 2 months in Ethiopia, 2 months in Uganda, 2 months in Zambia, 6 months, those 3 countries, and I'm going to go to everywhere inside each of those countries. And then you would probably end up with a richer, more informative, more interesting experience, because you've seen all the regions within that country and seen and done so much more. Plus, you're not I mean, the most stressful thing in traveling is borders, getting visas, crossing borders, changing money. And nowadays it's even more complicated because you got to get the visa, you've got to change money, and you've got to get a new SIM card, you've got to get new apps, you've got to figure out all the technology in all these countries you're going to. Crossing a border these days is incredibly complicated. And the fewer borders you cross, the better for you. That's my opinion. And of course, it's one of these things about turning a fault into a virtue. I think I'm very, very lazy in many ways. I'm very hardworking in some ways, and I'm incredibly lazy in others. And that results that when I go traveling, I just like to stay in the same place. Crossing borders is so stressful and it's so difficult. I don't like crossing borders, and I won't do it if I can help it. So if you give me a choice, I will go to one country instead of going to 10 countries. Changing money, getting new e-wallets now installed on you, a new e-wallet for every country, a new train ticket booking app for every country, new visa. Oh, it just goes on and on and on now. It's exhausting. But anyway, so maybe I do this because of a fault in me that I'm lazy, but I turn it into a virtue by arguing that you end up having a better travel experience. But anyway, Moto, he did this classic mistake. I think it's a mistake where he wants to go on a motorcycle journey. That's what he wants to do. And he decided, well, the biggest thing I can do is go around the world. And I think that's a mistake, but it is very dramatic and it's very exciting. And he's trying to sell his YouTube channel as well. I'll get into that in a minute. So, of course, on a YouTube channel, it's a much better hook. It's like, oh, look, this guy's going around the world. Will he make it? Will he rise to the challenge, sort of thing? And then you want to follow his story because it's an ongoing story with a very clear goal. And if he just was going to one country to have really good experiences and have a really rich, great time, that isn't as sellable. You can't market it on YouTube as well. But when you look at his line, for example, all I see when he draws the line through every region and every country, all I see is everything that he's missing. Because of course, these are just his plans. I'm sure he's going to vary his route to take in interesting regions. But all I see is a line going through the middle of a country and seeing nothing else. And when he describes his route, it starts in Alaska because he wanted to start at the geographical most northerly point. And then, so my route is going to take me through North America, then Europe, then Asia, then Australia, New Zealand. But of course, because he's going around the world, he's completely missed Africa. And he's completely missed South America and Central America. And that happens all the time. Like North Americans and Europeans, they decide to go around the world. They start where they are, and then they go around the world to the east or to the west. They go around the planet at that level. And of course, most of the planet is below that line. We're talking South America and Africa. And, well, of course, he is going to Australia and New Zealand. But what about Africa? What about South America? Those are huge parts of the world. But according to his dream of going around the world, South America and Africa don't exist at this point. So I always find that odd. If you're truly going to go around the world, his route should have taken him from Alaska in the north, through North America, then Central America, then South America, then across to Africa, through Africa, then Europe, then Asia, then Oceania, right? That would be going around the world. But of course, that is an extremely, extremely ambitious project. And that was the other thing that I thought about with him, with Moto. Because as I found out in his prep videos, He's never gone on a motorcycle trip before. He doesn't have a motor. At the beginning, when he came up with this idea, I want to ride a motorcycle around the world, he was inspired by Ewan McGregor and Charlie Boorman, I think their names are. Those are the guys that did those classic documentaries around the world. No. Oh boy, now I've forgotten the name. Let me look these up real quick. Yes, I knew these names. I just couldn't think of them at the moment. The very first one was in 2004 called Long Way Round. And Charlie Boorman and Ewan McGregor, they went from London to New York via Europe and Asia. So they essentially did an around-the-world journey, but exactly as I described, where they basically skipped Africa and South America, even though it's billed as going around the whole world. But then they followed that up because they realized, yeah, well, we missed Africa, so that's next on our list. And then they did, in 2007, Long Way Down. And that was, they traveled from Scotland to South Africa. And then, again, because they knew they missed South America, then in 2020, they did it again, calling it Long Way Up, where they did the classic ride from the tip of South America up to California. So, and now, of course, I've watched all of these. I've watched them all multiple times, and they're classic travel series that end up inspiring people like Moto. And Moto, talking about why he's going around the world on a motorcycle, he says specifically he was inspired by these documentaries by Ewan McGregor and Charlie Boorman, and he was inspired by Itchy Boots. So those were his two role models, beginning with Ewan McGregor, just for the whole idea of traveling the world by motorcycle, and then Itchy Boots for the YouTube side of things, how to make a YouTube channel, how to film yourself. Because Ewan McGregor, when he did it, that was back in the old days, before modern technology existed. So, of course, his journey was filmed by a film crew. They had a massive support team. They had people in an office back home taking care of all of the paperwork, all of the documents, all of the visas, all of the flights, everything that needed to be done in terms of logistics and shipping and spare parts. That was all being handled by a team back in an office in London. And then they had support teams with them and film crews with them. And, it's a massive, massive undertaking. And I've always had a bit of an issue with those programs. The same way I love shows like that. I enjoy them, but I'm always aware that they are an illusion. They're more of a fantasy than anything else, because when they're packaged and presented as these two guys traveling around the world on their own and having these big adventures, but of course they're in the middle of a film set essentially, and then they have to make up all of these artificial rules to make it seem like an independent journey, that, okay, we're here just to film you. So if you get in trouble, we can't help you. So they get all these dramatic moments where their motorcycle gets stuck in the mud or it breaks down in the middle of nowhere. They could turn to their film crew or their production team and say, hey, listen, can you guys make a phone call and get a tow truck out here? Or can you go drive to the next village and get 10 men, pay them to come back and pick up my motorcycle and get it out of the mud? They could do that. They have the resources to do it because they've got all these people with them and all this money and all this communication equipment. But they have these artificial rules like, no, you are on your own. We're just here to document. And then they get video of them fighting to get their motorcycle out of the mud, fighting to get their motorcycle fixed. And of course, that makes it a much more interesting show. But me being me, all I can think about is, well, just out of frame, there's like 15 people watching them, filming them and recording audio and all that. And it always ends up feeling a little bit weird. So if you take one of those shows as your inspiration, it's like, wow, look at that amazing experience those guys had. I want to do that. You've got to make sure you're taking that with a grain of salt, because what they're doing isn't actually what they're doing. So you have to remember that. And Moto, he actually is very aware of that, and he talked about that. And then he moved on to talk about Itchy Boots as an inspiration, that nowadays we have people like Itchy Boots and many, many, many more who are traveling around the world, and they're bristling with cameras, and they have GoPros and other action cameras, things like that, and they're filming themselves, recording their own audio, and they're bringing their own laptop. They are essentially their own film crew, and they're doing their own logistics, and they're doing everything themselves. And that was his inspiration for what he's doing. And he talked about that, and I found that quite interesting, because of course I'm exactly the same. I find inspiration in the same films by Ewan McGregor, the same YouTube channels, and I could relate to everything that he was talking about. But one big difference with him is that he got all his inspiration and decided, I want to ride a motorcycle around the world. But at that time, he didn't even have a motorcycle license. He didn't know how. I guess he had ridden a motorcycle as a kid, as we all have done in Canada. You ride a motorbike at some point. So you can say, well, I know how to ride a motorcycle. But he didn't own one. He didn't have a motorcycle license. He was not a skilled or experienced rider. So that right off the bat, that's kind of a crazy thing. It's like, I was thinking, man, you might want to start smaller. I mean, you may be biting off a lot more than you can chew. I can't think of her exact history right now, but Itchy Boots didn't just wake up one morning and ride around the world and document it. She was just out there traveling and started riding a motorbike almost, she's interested in motorbikes, and I think she got a Royal Enfield when she was in India at some point and started traveling by motorcycle instead of going by bus and train like a backpacker. And then over time, she evolved into an experienced motorcyclist, a passionate motorcyclist, and then started filming. She kind of eased into it naturally over many, many years. She didn't just wake up one morning and decide, I'm going to go around the world on a motorcycle. No, she was in India, I think, traveling anyway, and then she said, why don't I get on a motorbike and try this out? And she kind of eased into it and learned as she went. And so it's very, very different from going from 0 to 100 all at once, from not even having a motorcycle license to, I'm going to go around the entire world, and it's going to take years and years and years. And on top of that, I'm going to film it all, and I'm going to have a YouTube channel. Though apparently he did have experience with that. I forget what it was now, but he had a quite successful YouTube channel already. So he knew how to shoot video, he knew how to edit video, and he had a YouTube channel. Though at this point, mountain biking. Yeah, he was really into off-road mountain biking, like going up and down mountain trails on mountain bikes. And that's one reason he was thinking that he could ride a motorcycle off-road like Itchy Boots. He had confidence doing that because he had a lot of experience on a mountain bike. And he had a YouTube channel all about mountain biking. And oddly enough, I don't know anything about this history, but he was living in a van. So he was already deep into that kind of world. He said for years or something like that, he was living in a camper van. So he was living that van life. And that really surprised me because I was thinking, like van life is super popular on YouTube, or at least it was for a little while. It was like it took over YouTube for a while. Every travel YouTuber realized that van life was the new hot topic, and all of them abandoned their backpacks and they bought vans and they renovated them and put beds and stoves and bathrooms. They rebuilt the van to make it a camper van, and then they started traveling around in the camper van because that was really hot for a while. And I don't know whether that has disappeared. I don't know if it's as popular anymore. But anyway, there he was, already living in a camper van, already had a YouTube channel, and then I was thinking, why not go around the world in your camper van? You know how to do that. You already have the camper van, and it's super popular on YouTube. It seemed like a pretty good fit, but he was inspired by the motorcycle journeys, so that's what he decided to do. And then in his prep videos, one of his videos is all about motorcycle training. So he took courses in the safe and proper way to ride a motorcycle, and then he had to do the written test to get his learner's permit, the whole system in Canada for getting a license, all the stages, and he documented all of that. And then he had to do his official driving test or riding test, whatever you call it, and then get his license. And then, of course, he had to pick out a motorcycle. And I don't know anything about this, but he picked out a Kawasaki 300cc kind of bike. And I guess it's a famous bike. A lot of people know about it, and it has a bit of a cult following. So he was looking for this is very interesting to me. He was looking for a lightweight bike because he saw Itchy Boots falling over on her motorbike all the time. And of course, she would have to pick up her bike. So you have to physically be able to pick up your own bike. And then people like Ewan McGregor, in their documentaries, they were riding state-of-the-art, I think BMWs, like 1100cc, like huge, powerful motorcycles loaded with gear and equipment. And they were massive machines that weighed a ton. And what I remember from when I watched Long Way Round, I thought those motorcycles were a horrible choice. Too big, too heavy, too complicated, and they seem to fall apart all the time. They seem to break down constantly. And I think there was at one point in the series where one of the guys, or like one of their support crew, or maybe it was Charlie Boorman himself, I don't know, there's somebody involved in the journey. Also, maybe there were 3 of them? My memory is not that clear about it. But I remember there was somebody involved who said, the heck with that, and they switched to like a local bike. Because when you're going through all these countries on your 1100 BMW massive machine that's breaking down all the time and costs a fortune, all around you, you see the local people just bombing all over the place on these little local machines. And then you start looking at them going, maybe that's what I should use. And one of these guys did, and he got like a local 250 or 125 or whatever it was, just a local motorcycle, and then just started riding her, and it was like, well, okay, this is much better, much more fun, more suitable to like blending in with the local world. Because again, my feeling about all of this, and this extends into the Itchy Boots experience, into the experience of all these people that have big fancy motorcycles. When I watch their videos and when I think about being in their position, I don't like it, because I find that the motorcycle, the gear, the clothing, and the helmet, they act like a barrier between you and the world around you. You're cut off from everybody and everything. You look so different, like you've come from an alien planet, almost like an astronaut, because like someone like Nora Lee, she's dressed head to toe in protective gear, like the hardcore motorcycling clothing. I don't know what it's made out of these days. Probably not leather anymore, but in the old days, of course, you'd wear leather with knee pads and elbow pads and shoulder pads. And the guys that ride the racing bikes that I saw in Taiwan all the time on the weekend, they're dressed head to toe in bright neon clothing, and they even have these weird pieces of armor on their back, like these big pieces of plastic that stretch way out from their back, which I guess if they go down at 150 miles an hour, they lay their bike down and they go sliding along the pavement. Of course, all of this gear protects them, but also this weird plastic brace on their backs. It looks like a turtle shell. They look like ninja turtles, and I guess it's to protect their neck and their heads, and they slide along on all this armor, and they have these huge helmets. And then someone like Nora Lee, of course, she's got that huge helmet with the faceplate and cameras mounted on the chin. And of course, you can't talk to people. It's very difficult to talk to anyone. And I don't know, it just feels like a barrier between you and the world around you. And then and the bike itself, so big, so expensive, you have to worry about it all the time. Your entire experience is about the motorcycle, not about the countries. I mean, your original idea is, wow, I want to go see Turkey and Uganda and Nepal and India. I want to see these countries and experience life and meet people. But then you hop on your motorbike for your round the world, and you're basically in a bubble the entire time, and you're really isolated from everything in those worlds. So I don't really like as a model for me, if someone said to me, hey, Planet Doug, I get a mystery benefactor that says, I want to fund you for your dream trip, and I want to give you a BMW 1100 and you can go around the world. I would say, no. I would take the money and I would spend it on a 125cc scooter. And that's what I want to use in each country. But my dream, if I were uber wealthy, would probably be every country you just get a new motorbike or a new scooter, but a very, very small one. I like scooters. I don't actually like motorbikes. I love scooters. They're just so friendly. They put you in touch with the world. So it's a nice compromise. But anyway, I would say, no. I don't want your 1100 adventure bike. I would like land in a new country, buy a local scooter, a used one, drive it around that country, and then give it away, fly to the next country, or take a bus to the next country. And as soon as you cross the border, just buy a new one. And each country get a new bike, and then strap your backpack to the back of it, and away you go. That would be the way to travel. This whole idea of buying a fancy motorbike in your home country, and you want to use that same motorbike to go all the way around the world, I don't know. It does not appeal to me. That puts the focus too much on the motorbike itself. But again, I can see why you would do that for YouTube, because people love motorcycles. The motorcycle YouTube channels are so popular. And the people who follow them, to be honest, they don't seem to care that much about the world. Okay, it doesn't really matter what the country they're in, what language they're speaking, what food they're eating, what the music is like in that country. None of that content is of any interest to them. They want to know about the motorcycle. That's why they follow Itchy Boots. That's why they follow Moto. And of course, they want to see beautiful scenery. You got to fly your drone, of course, and get beautiful scenery. But as soon as you stop your motorbike and go look at something local, the views of that video drop to zero. So if one of these guys is riding their motorbike, the video might get 100,000 views. But if he posts a video like, oh, I went to a local market in Nepal, 5,000 views. Like nobody will watch that video, but as soon as they get back on the motorbike, boom, everyone's watching the video again. So yeah, makes sense from a YouTube point of view. How did I go off on that tangent? Yeah, I was talking about Moto. Yes, he bought this Kawasaki, and he bought it because it was lightweight, using Itchy Boots as a model, and it's a 300cc. But I don't know about this bike. I'm pretty worried about it, to be honest, because it's, I mean, it seems like a good choice, lightweight. It's a kind of a good bike for off-road and on-road. At least that's what he's telling me, and I have to trust him on that. But it has one big problem, and it seems like also maintenance intervals. This is not something I'd thought about before. I learned this from Itchy Boots. I didn't know this, but different motorcycles have different maintenance intervals. Essentially, how often do you have to change the oil, change the spark plugs, and tune up the bike? And some motorcycles have incredibly short ones. I find this hard to believe, but Moto was saying that there was one or two motorcycles that everybody was saying was really good for travel, but they have a maintenance interval of 1,000 kilometers. So every 1,000 kilometers, you have to get it maintained. You have to get it serviced. Change the oil, change the spark plugs, change this, test this. And of course, 1,000 kilometers, if you're going around the world, that's nothing at all. So that's ridiculous. So the Kawasaki he bought has a really big maintenance interval. And Itchy Boots looks for motorcycles like that as well. So that's one part of it. But a big problem with this one is it has a small gas tank. Like really, really small. It was like 8 liters or something like that. So for him, he bought this knowing it had this problem. But his idea was to add an extra gas tank. So, okay, I'm going to buy this motorbike. Biggest problem, small gas tank. So I'm going to look for an aftermarket extra gas tank that I can add. And he found some guy, maybe in Scotland, I want to say, but I don't know, Germany, somewhere, some guy developed what he calls the adventure kit for this particular Kawasaki. And part of the adventure kit it's like a complete modification, includes adding like 18 liters of gas tank. And so he bought one of these kits, and there's an entire video about him mounting the kit. But I guess it comes with all kinds of things. 2 extra gas tanks for a total of like 18. Maybe it adds 18 liters or it adds 10, something like that. But there's 1 extra gas tank on each side of the bike's original gas tank. And I guess you have to wire it into the electronics because it has to, on your fuel gauge, now your motorcycle has to register fuel levels in the original tank and in these new extra tanks. So you have to wire it in somehow. And there's like a tube pumping system because you've got to move gas from these tanks into your original tank or something. I don't know exactly how it works, but to me it looked really complicated. And I'm worried about that because it looked like a lot of pieces that can break, a lot of bolts that can shake free, a lot of, it just looked like a lot to add to a motorcycle. And it puts a apparatus on the front of the bike that gives you a place to put your GPS device for navigation, and then you have to move the headlight. But in his case, his headlight didn't fit, so he had to go onto eBay and get an old headlight from a previous version of this Kawasaki and order it on eBay, and then take off the new headlamp, the big fancy LED headlamp on his brand new Kawasaki, and replace it with an old one and figure out new ways of attaching it. Anyway, it seemed like a lot, and it made me very, very nervous. And it seemed very expensive. He didn't talk about cost, but someone left a comment saying that they looked it up, and that kit that he bought cost nearly $3,000 just for the modification adventure kit. And the guy was saying, man, I can buy a used Kawasaki for $3,000. So like I can buy that whole motorcycle for $3,000. So that's a lot of money to spend just to add an extra gas tank. So maybe another motorbike would have been a better choice. But don't listen to me when it comes to this, because I don't know anything about motorbikes. I have no experience with them. I don't know a thing about them. And now that he's riding the motorcycle, somehow the sound of the engine bothers me. It sounds like a sewing machine. I get the 300cc. I mean, that's a lot of power. That's more power than I would ever need. I would be happy with a 125cc scooter. 150 would be better. I've got a little bit of experience with scooters, and I felt a huge difference between 125 and 150, and I like the 150cc models. They feel better for traveling, going up steep hills. That extra 25cc adds a lot of power. It's quite surprising. So I'm happy with 150cc. So his motorbike is 300. I think, okay, it must have more than enough power. But the sound of the engine is weird to me. It has this clickety-clackety sound. It sounds underpowered to me. And he keeps stalling it. It's always stalling. Every time he gets near a bump, like a log or a rock or going uphill or something, he stalls it over and over and over again. And then the startup sounds really slow. I don't know why it is stalling so much. Maybe he just doesn't know what he's doing as a rider. I don't know. But again, Itchy Boots never seems to stall. Her motorbike always seems to just keep going. And somehow the sound of her motorbike sounds appropriate. It just sounds powerful, even though she rides relatively under. I think, yeah, she did her entire South America, North America journey on a 300cc, right? A Honda 300cc, so more than enough power. I think Africa was a 300cc bike as well. Her new one, her new Yamaha, is a 600, which is double the size, double the power. But anyway, this 300cc Kawasaki, it just sounds weird to me. And as I'm watching his video, I'm just scared for him all the time because it keeps stalling. It doesn't sound like it has enough power. And this clickety-clackety thing. And then whenever it stalls, he hits the starter, and it seems to go on too long, like it's not going to start. And then it kicks in. But it always sounds to me like, oh, it's not going to start. It's not going to start. And somehow, I do not see this bike making it to Alaska, let alone around the world. I'm really worried about it. I don't think it's going to make it. I don't think so. But anyway, as I said, don't listen to me. I don't know anything about motorcycles or motorcycle engines and how they're supposed to sound. But yeah, anyway, he put the bike together, added the adventure kit. And then I talked about this in my I talked about the video where he left home. And I was a little bit worried too at that point because he was shooting video. Okay, a big dramatic moment. I'm starting my journey around the world. This is the first time. It's all very exciting and dramatic. And he gets on the motorbike, starts it up, tries to start moving. And the first thing he says is like, oh man, this is heavy. And he kind of wobbles there for a minute. He's like, oh man, this is so heavy. It came as a surprise to him almost. Like this was the first time he'd actually ridden the motorcycle with his full load on it. And again, that made me nervous. And like, oh boy, I think you might have wanted to test this before you left home. So again, yeah, who knows? So yeah, and then he just posted a video yesterday. And that's actually the video I wanted to talk about for my YouTube stories. That's the video I wanted to talk about. And I finally got around to it. Called me Mr. Tangent. But it's a very interesting video because it's so Itchy Boots. I mean, Itchy Boots is his role model, and you can see that in the video because he's not copying, but he is doing an exact version of an Itchy Boots video in terms of the length of the video, the style of it. It begins with him riding the motorcycle in the morning, and then he rides to a scenic area. Then he flies the drone to get drone footage of that beautiful scenery with dramatic music, sort of sweeping orchestral music, very similar to Itchy Boots music. Then he lands the drone, then he keeps riding, and then he arrives at his destination, and the video is over. Plus, he deliberately looked at a map and basically says, okay, here's the main road. That's the good road. I'm not going to go that way. Over here, there's a small road that goes into the Rocky Mountains. It looks like an old logging road or something. And he says, okay, that's the road I'm going to take. So that's exactly what Nora Lee does for Itchy Boots. She looks for the toughest, muddiest, rockiest road she can find because that makes good content for YouTube, and I guess it's more exciting. I always have a little bit of an issue with that because I feel like there's a good compromise. I mean, you can look for the back road that is more interesting and more fun to ride, but if your back road is 100% mud that you can't ride through, isn't that going just a little bit too far? Maybe there's a sweet spot between the highway, paved highway where everybody rides and it's just full of traffic. That's one end of the spectrum. And the other end is a goat track or a jungle trail that essentially is nothing but mud. Maybe that's going too far in the adventure direction. Maybe there's a sweet spot of a road that is a backcountry road, beautiful scenery, and yet it's still rideable. Maybe those roads exist. But anyway, he picked this road, and I don't know. We'll see what happens because he left the video on a cliffhanger where he crashes. And the video thumbnail, again, is very much an Itchy Boots thing because it says in a big one word on the thumbnail, it says crash. And then the title of the video is something like, they warned me not to take this road and I should have listened. So that was sort of the name of the title of the video. And then the thumbnail shows him crashing with the big word crash. And that's where the video ends, actually, with the crash. And we won't find out until the next video how bad the crash was, or was it really a crash? I think it was, to be honest, based on what I saw. And then what are the consequences? And did he get out of there? But the interesting thing for me leading up to that point is that he did fall over one time where he was on a really steep, rocky thing. And as I said, the motorbike kept stalling on him over and over again. He had to keep restarting the bike. And at one point, he lost his footing. He was on a very steep, narrow trail, and the whole bike fell over, and he fell off the bike, and he could not lift it, which I found interesting. And I'm still thinking about that because the reason he bought a 300cc Kawasaki, the main reason, he said, was to be lightweight and so that when I drop it, I can pick it up easily. And here he was on his very first real adventure video, off-road riding. He dropped the bike and he couldn't pick it up. He tried and he tried and he tried and he couldn't lift it. And he was using all of his strength. I mean, after a while, I was thinking, man, I'm starting to worry about your back here. And I guess he didn't have the technique yet. So maybe over time he will develop a technique. But I started thinking there was something about this motorcycle. And to be honest, I think it's the adventure kit. It's the extra gas tanks that he added to the side. It made the motorbike a lot wider and removed the obvious handholds. So I think the Kawasaki by itself with the original gas tank is quite thin and narrow. So I think if you drop it and then you try to pick it up, like you can get your body against the bike. Like you could put your back against the bike and then reach down with your hands and then pick up, get a good grip on the bike and then lift with your legs. And then because of the narrow form factor of the Kawasaki, you could then lift it and you're pushing it against your back and then you can put it into position. But now that he's added the extra gas tanks, it bulges out to I'm just guessing here, so don't listen to me. But it looks like the bike is now more rounded and the extra gas tanks stick out to the side in such a way that it's hard to get a grip on the motorcycle. And then as he was lifting it, it's still heavy, but then he would eventually get to a point you can feel it, like right there. You need to adjust and you get a certain amount of leverage. You shift your leverage and then you get it the rest of the way. You lift it halfway up in one position and then you have to shift a little bit and then you get it over the hump and get it upright. But because of this extra gas tank, he would get it halfway up and then he couldn't get it the rest of the way. And I think it was these extra gas tanks that were causing a problem. But anyway, he had to stop and remove his luggage, get his luggage off the bike, get it lighter, and try again and again and again and again. And eventually he did manage to get it upright, but whew, what an effort. I never saw Itchy Boots struggle that hard to lift her bike. One time she crashed in Africa and the bike kind of fell upside down into a ditch. And then she couldn't do it on her own, and she had to get people to help her to get it out of that situation. But I think whenever she was on a flat road and the bike fell over, it was hard for her to do it, but she was able to do it, and it wasn't nearly as hard. She didn't seem to struggle nearly as much as Moto struggled. So that made me worry about him. But it was a pretty tough position. There was the bike kind of fell into a ditch at the side of the road, and it was very rocky and loose, so the wheels would keep sliding out from under him. There were a lot of branches in the way, trees and branches, and there were mosquitoes. I felt so bad for him because I know if you've not been in the Canadian bush, you can't understand what this means. But he kept talking about how many mosquitoes there were because he had to take his helmet off, and then these mosquitoes attacked him. And unless you've lived through a mosquito swarm in Canada, you do not know what it's like. And if you're trying for 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour to lift up your motorcycle, removing the bags, you're in this weird tight position, sweating, and now these mosquitoes are on you, oh man, you lose your mind. And I felt so bad for this poor guy. And oh man, he was breathing heavy because of the physical effort. He was like like the world's strongest man competition doing a deadlift. All of his strength, he needed every ounce of his strength to lift that bike and get it upright. And then you could hear him breathing like a locomotive. And I think it took him a long time to recover. Once he finally got it up and he rode it out of there, probably took him 20 minutes just to get his heart rate and his breathing back down to a natural level. And this was the first time he dropped the bike. And it was that hard to get it back up again. It was like, oh man, that does not bode well. But I guess he'll get better at it over time. He'll figure it out. But I'm kind of worried about this guy. And as I wrote in a message to a friend of mine talking about this, I have a feeling he may have bitten off more than he can chew. And he was upfront a little bit about his finances too. He basically said his goal is to ride around the world, but he says, yeah, I don't have enough money to do it. So I'm counting on YouTube to make enough money to pay for this journey. He's going on blind faith that this will happen. And he has a Patreon. And he's hoping through YouTube views, maybe he's hoping to become famous enough that he will get sponsorships. He's basically hoping to become Itchy Boots. And he's starting off the journey without enough money to finish it. So, yeah. Anyway, I like the guy. I like his journey. I like his style. I like his videos. I like everything about him. So he's going to be my one of my main watches going forward. And of course, I've subscribed to his channel and I've checked out his Patreon and all that kind of thing. So yeah, so that is my first YouTube story, the only one for today. And I think that's everything I wanted to say about him. And yeah, I recommend his channel. Very interesting, nice guy, embarking on an interesting, challenging journey, and I want to see how it turns out. Well, it's time for me to make another cup of coffee, and then I'm going to move on to Planet Doug stories. The fact that I mentioned his Patreon is a nice segue into me talking about the YouTube Patreon, and when I come back with my next cup of coffee, that's what I'm going to talk about next. All right, I'm all set for this next session of me talking because I've got my second cup of coffee going and I'm all settled in. One thing I didn't mention about this Rode Wireless Go and the new update, another little technology note, is that they did add this other quite interesting feature where you can use the power button on the microphone to stop and start recording. That's a setting that you can select in the Rode app. You can't choose any of these settings like on the microphone itself. There are no buttons or menus or anything like that. You have to set all this up by plugging it into your computer first, opening the Rode Central app. But then you can choose all these settings, and one of them is like the recording, how it records. And in the old days, there were two basic methods you could use. One method was called always, and that meant that as soon as you turned the microphone on, it starts recording and saving audio into its internal memory. Whenever it's on, it's recording. And the only way to stop it recording is to turn it off. So essentially, turning the microphone on and off was the same as starting and stopping the recording. It's always recording when it's on, and that's what I would always use. It was the most convenient for me. The other setting was called backup, and it worked differently. That the microphone would start recording to its internal memory whenever it connected to the receiver. So essentially, that's what was controlling whether it was recording or not. So you could turn on the microphone, but even though it's on, it's not recording yet. But then when you turn on the receiver and the mic connects to the receiver, boom, that triggers it to start recording internally. And they call that backup because the idea is the only time this happens is when you're ready to record video. So you've got the receiver on the camera's all set up, you're ready to start recording video, so you turn on the Rode receiver, and then that connects to the microphone, and it starts making a backup audio recording internally. And then when you're done recording video, in theory, you turn off the receiver, and then now the microphone stops. So the receiver essentially acts as a start-stop recording function for the microphone. And I never use that because I never turn the receiver off. I never turn the microphone off either when I start the day. I turn both of them on, and then I just leave them on all day. The battery lasts 7 or 8 hours. It gets me through the whole day. So I've never turning the receiver off and on anyway. So I always use the always setting. But they've added a new feature where you can use the power button to start and stop recording. And in theory, that's amazing. That makes everything better. Unfortunately, the microphone was never designed to be a standalone recorder, so it doesn't have a recording light. So when you use the power button to make it start recording, there's no red light indicator to tell you what it's doing, that it is recording. So then you end up worrying about it all the time. Like, is it recording? Is it not recording? Did I make a mistake? Did I do it right? And they did try to fix that problem. What they've done, I figured this out by testing, is that it does have two blue buttons, blue lights. One blue light, when it is on, it means the power is on. So that blue light tells you the microphone is on. The other blue light flashes or is steady, and it flashes when it's not connected to the receiver, and when it connects to the receiver, it goes steady. So two solid blue lights tells you it's on and it's connected to the receiver. A flashing blue light tells you it's not connected. And that's all the information the lights tell you. But Rode added something else that when it's recording, then every 5 seconds or every 10 seconds, the two blue lights give two quick flashes. Flash, flash. And then 5 seconds later, flash, flash. And that tells you it's recording. And it's not a bad compromise, but I don't like it. It's not clear enough. I need to be able to look at the microphone and tell instantly whether it's recording or not. I can't sit here staring at it, waiting for the flash flash to happen, whether it happens in 5 seconds or 10 seconds. So basically, the power button, start, stop, it feels too... I'd end up thinking about it all the time and worrying about it all the time. Am I recording? Am I not? And if you use the always feature, then you don't have to worry about it. You just turn it on and you know it's recording and you have confidence and you can relax. So anyway, it's a good try. I like that they added that feature. It might come in handy in the future, but right now I'm not using it. It's a funny thing. I was watching a YouTube video the other day where a guy was He made a tutorial. He basically said, yeah, I bought one of these Rode Wireless Go microphones, and I know it can record internally, and I watched all these tutorial videos to learn how to do it, but all the tutorial videos were terrible, and they didn't tell me what I needed to know, so I decided to make my own tutorial video. And then he made this 10, 15-minute long video about how to do all these things I'm talking about. And there were all these comments on the video saying, oh, thank you so much. This helped me out. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And yet, everything he said was wrong. Everything he said was either wrong, incomplete, or just, I don't know, the whole thing was wrong. And stuff like that on YouTube bothers me so much. And I usually let it slide because I don't need to be going all over YouTube, leaving comments, telling people they're wrong, correcting them. There's no advantage in it for me. There's no percentage there. But for this video, I did, because I know how it actually works. So I did leave a long comment as Planet Doug on this guy's video, and I basically said, well, everything you just said is either completely wrong, incomplete, or outdated. And this is how it actually works. And then I broke down how it really works, and I filled in all the missing information. Anyway, stuff like that annoys me because he did post a video saying, I'm going to teach you how to use the Rode Wireless Go as a standalone recorder. And then he never even talked about that. All he talked about was getting a backup recording when you're shooting video. He never even mentioned how you can just use it as a microphone, recording internally. He just either didn't know about it or just decided it wasn't even important to bring it up. And he said that you started and stopped recording by pushing the power button 3 times, like 3 quick presses, and then it starts recording. Press it 3 times again and it stops. And I have no idea where he got that idea. Completely wrong. And yet all these people were leaving comments saying, oh, thank you so much. You helped me so much. I don't know. Stuff like that on YouTube bothers me. How people can be so completely wrong and yet nobody seems to know. Anyway, another tangent. So, moving on to Planet Doug and my Patreon update, Patreon thoughts. I mentioned that Moto has a Patreon, so I went to check his out, and it's a pretty simple setup. He decided to have, to let people, I think he has no tiers, so he just has a Patreon, that's it, with no levels, and he lets people decide their own monthly donation, their own monthly contribution. So if you click on the button to join his Patreon, you get a window and then you can enter your own amount. And it starts off with a suggested default of $5 per month. But then you can just put in $1 or $1 million or $100 or $2 or $5. You can choose your own amount, and then that's what he did, which is an interesting approach. Patreon also allows you to have a per video model so that people can donate a certain amount of money per video. And of course, I can't do that. I wouldn't do that simply because I would like the freedom to post as many videos as I want. And if someone says, oh, I'm going to donate $5 for every Planet Doug video, and then I start posting 100 videos a month, clearly that's going to get out of control. So I don't like the per video approach. You can use that if you're very, very consistent, and on your channel you post 1 video per week, and you do that regularly and routinely, and people can make a calculation. And if you stick to that, it would work out. But in my case, it wouldn't, because I occasionally post a lot of videos and then maybe no videos, then a lot. It would just get a little bit weird. So, yeah, so with my Patreon, I did something interesting. I've been talking a lot about how I wanted a theme for my tiers, and I've been looking carefully at this idea of using various planets. So I came up with this idea of 4 tiers, starting with the forest planet, then the jungle planet, then the ocean planet, then the mountain planet. And in my head, it seemed reasonable. I knew there wasn't an obvious hierarchy, because really what you should do is something like bronze, silver, gold, platinum. And the bronze membership level is the lowest, platinum membership is the highest, silver, gold. It's clear which one is above the others or lower than the others. But in general, I don't like that idea for 2 reasons. One is it's boring. There's no fun, and there's no way to talk to people. For example, if you're putting a post onto Patreon, or you're speaking in a live stream or on a video, and you want to talk to people that are members of the silver level, well, how do you address them? Silver patrons? Oh, hello to all my silver patrons. Hey, gold patrons, platinum. It just seems a little bit weird, and there's nothing much you can do with that language. You can't have any fun with it. And I dislike the obvious idea that gold is better than bronze. Like if you win a bronze medal at the Olympics, it's almost like you lost. You're a loser. You only got the bronze medal. The gold medal winner, the gold person is worth more than you, is better than you. So I don't really like that idea. And my idea is that, okay, If I just give you a list that says forest, planet, ocean, mountain, what's the hierarchy? Well, it's not clear, is it? It really isn't 100% clear. You need context to get the hierarchy. But the fact that there is no hierarchy without context, maybe that's not a problem, because once you put them into Patreon, there is a hierarchy. There is a context. And through the context, you might absorb the hierarchy. So maybe forest, jungle, ocean, mountain isn't obvious, but then you go to the Planet Doug Patreon, well, you can see, oh, forest is number 1, jungle is number 2, ocean is number 3, mountain is number 4. It's laid out from left to right. And then, of course, the dollar value associated with each one is going from lowest to highest, maybe $2 for forest, $5 for jungle, etc., etc. So you can see the hierarchy. It's laid out in front of you visually in terms of placement, and then you can do more with writing. You can start talking about them, and in your language, you make it clear that the mountain planet, ooh, this is the lofty, the highest, the most elevated. This is for the exclusive club of people who basically can afford a Swiss chalet, who can climb Mount Everest. So my idea is that over time, the hierarchy will become apparent, that it will become baked in, even if it isn't obvious right from the very beginning. And of course, my idea, I talked about this already at length, that the forest is the best place to live in a way because it can support the largest population, the largest community. That's where people would start living because you can cut down trees and build houses and plant crops. It's just a place that is a natural starting point for societies to live. And then that's where most people would choose to live. And the lowest tier, the least expensive one, would likely be where most people would sign up. So the forest felt like the biggest, most welcoming environment. So forest planet is the first tier. And then jungle is more for a smaller, more select group of people who are willing to brave the wild, go into the dangerous Amazon rainforest or the African jungle where there are pythons and tigers and jungle rivers and crocodiles, piranhas, things like that. It's like a beautiful, wild, exotic place, a wonderful place to live, but fewer people would live there because the challenges are higher, and on Planet Doug, the cost is higher. It costs more for the jungle planet than the forest planet because fewer people would live there. So it made sense to me. And then it continued on to the end where ocean planet, that consists of a world of Caribbean islands, the Hawaiian Islands, the Maldives, resorts, expensive scuba diving, round the world ocean cruises. So this is a more expensive, more tropical, a place you go for an expensive holiday where you know it costs more money. And then, of course, the mountain planet was the highest one of all. And the mountain planet was kind of a throwaway tier anyway. It's not really part of the tier structure. So it all started to make sense to me, and I'm still leaning in that direction. But what I did yesterday is I took my ideas in short form, in brief, and sent them to a few friends of mine, friends that live in Asia and friends from North America, and I asked them, without any context, without trying to convince them one way or another, okay, forest planet, jungle planet, ocean planet, mountain planet, what do you think? You know, you see this for Patreon tiers. Can I get your input? What do you think of this? What's your opinion? And I got some interesting feedback. Slurp of coffee. First of all, of course, people picked up on the idea that there's no hierarchy. It's like, but how do you know the jungle is higher than the forest. So that was one concern, and I've already talked about that. I think it is a concern. I think it is better to have a clearer hierarchy. I've noticed some Patreons, I mean, they tried to get imaginative and inventive, but even they had trouble because, like, Paddy Doyle, he chose a film production model. So his first tier is a runner, which is like a showrunner. And then the next tier above that, I think, is director. And then above that is producer. Then above that is executive. And then above that is CEO. And I kind of get it, but at the same time, it's not absolutely clear to me. A producer and an executive? I don't even know I don't know what an executive is exactly. And I don't know which one is higher. Like for me, director is higher than both of them because the director seems like the most important. I mean, really, in the film world, people don't know this in the mass world, but the producer really is the most important person. The producer is the one who makes the movie. The producer says, oh, here's this, has the idea for the movie, gets the funding for the movie, sells it to a studio, hires the director, hires this, the producer is the one who makes the movie. But most people aren't really aware of that. They think the director makes the movie. So the director, they think, is the most important. And then most people don't even know what a runner is, like a showrunner. They don't know who that person is. I do because I'm interested in movies and TV show production. So to me, I get it. Okay, showrunner, director, producer, executive, and then CEO. To me, I do see the hierarchy, but it isn't instantly obvious. And I don't think it's obvious to a lot of people. Other people chose a travel theme, and they tried to come up with different types of travelers, like a day tripper, a 2-week holiday person, a round-the-world adventurer, and they tried to build a hierarchy there. Others used more like a friendship model. So the lowest tier was pal, like, hey, we are pals. And then, like acquaintance, then pal, then good friend, then best friend. And again, that one, okay, props for trying something different. But again, I don't want to be your pal. I don't want to be your buddy. That feels too low to me. I don't know. I want to be your friend. And it feels weird to put people into the pal category because you're telling them, yeah, you know what? I don't know you very well, and we don't spend a lot of time together, and I'm not interested in getting to know you. Yeah, you're just an acquaintance. And then, oh, these people, now, oh, they're my friends. I like them better because they're not pals. And then you're talking to your friends, and it's like, well, he is my best friend. I like him even better than you. So it's just weird. One is more worthy than the other. So I don't like that idea as well. So I still go back to my forest, jungle, ocean, mountain hierarchy or tiers. It has a hierarchy, but it's subtle, and it's not the most important thing about it. And you can have a lot of fun with the language. But the other feedback I got was really quite interesting. This feedback came only from people in Asia, not from North Americans, which is a key difference here. All the people in Asia that I asked them for their input, they were confused about forest and jungle. They said, well, they're the same thing. There's no difference between forest and jungle. So that's really confusing. And I really had to think about that, and I chatted with them for a long time because I didn't get it at all. Like, what do you mean there's no difference between a forest and a jungle? Because we have forests in Canada, but we don't have any jungles. A forest is full of pine trees and oak trees and elm trees and yeah, a forest. A jungle is full of vines and tigers and monkeys and gorillas, and it's hot and steamy and it's a wild, exotic place. right? The Amazon River goes through a jungle, and it's so completely different from a Canadian forest. So I'm like, what do you mean there's no difference? But then as we talked about it, what I realized is that, well, in Asia, they don't have any forests. They only have jungles for the most part. So when they think of forest, they think jungle because that's all they know. I grew up living in Canadian forests, and the first time I went to a jungle, it's like, man, what a crazy place this is. A jungle, I mean, that's where Tarzan lives. That's where monkeys live. That's where pythons live. A jungle is in Africa. A jungle is in, Indonesia has jungles. The Congo in Africa, that's a jungle. And yeah, we don't have jungles in the United States or Canada or Europe. So in the West, I think there's a clear distinction between a jungle and a forest. But oddly enough, here in Asia, nobody got it. Everybody said jungle, forest, that's the same thing. And I can see their point because all they know are jungles and they're the same. They basically said if there are trees, it's a forest. And they don't care what kind of tree it is. It's all the same to them. There's a bunch of trees, well, that's a forest and that's a jungle. It's the same thing. So I found that fascinating. Yeah, really kind of interesting. And so we talked about that for a while. It's kind of funny with some people. I even sent them pictures because I have a photograph of Canadian forests. And I sent the guy, okay, here's a forest in Canada. And then online, I found an image of a jungle, and I sent that. And says, okay, that's a forest, and that's a jungle. Aren't they completely different? And he says, no, there's trees. I see trees, so they're all the same thing. If it's trees, it's a forest. And of course, what I figured out later on is that even, say, the Amazon jungle, it's called a rainforest, right? And even, I think, the jungles in Africa are also called rainforest. So now the jungle, the other name for it, has forest in the name, rainforest, which leads to the confusion. So I thought about this for a long time yesterday. And one friend of mine, we were talking about, well, what kind of an alternative, what other kind of planet can we have? And I told him about how my original idea was completely different. When I first came up with this idea, and just off the top of my head, and again, maybe because of my science fiction background, and I was looking for fun extremes, I think my very first list was something like desert planet, then jungle planet, then lava planet, then ocean planet, something like that. So I had desert planet and lava planet. Oh, I had desert planet, ice planet, and lava planet, and one more. Because they seemed like really fun, wild, crazy places. And then this friend of mine, he wrote back and said, hey, what about a desert planet? And then a minute later, he sent another comment saying, oh, yeah, maybe that wouldn't work because nobody wants to live in a desert, really. I mean, a desert is not a very attractive place. So maybe that's not the best thing. And that's what I concluded when I had my original idea. I loved the idea of an ice planet because you get, there's an ice planet in Star Wars, and it's a real science fiction idea. And then a lava planet covered in volcanoes. It's very dramatic and very exciting visually. But who wants to live on an ice planet and freeze to death? Who wants to live on a lava planet and get burned alive by lava coming out of the volcano, right? So suddenly these planets didn't seem like very interesting places to live. And then I started thinking about, okay, what kind of planets would be nice? People would want to live on them. Okay, a forest planet, that's a wonderful place to live, probably the best place to live. Then a jungle planet for those who want more excitement. And then an ocean planet for those who want luxury. And then, mountain planet. So that's how I came up with the idea, because every one of those planets would be a wonderful place to live in its own way. But all the other ones, ice planet, desert, lava, and what was it? Yeah, ice. They're pretty terrible places to live. And then my friend said, oh, desert planet. And, oh, no, that's not going to work. And then we chatted back and forth, and then I think he said something about urban. How about an urban planet? Because most people live in cities. And I thought about that myself before, but he really brought it into focus for me as a possibility. And I wrote back to him, yeah, that might work. Urban, but urban planet doesn't sound good. It doesn't roll off the tongue. And I thought, city planet, a planet made up of cities. And that's where I landed. So my new idea for Planet Doug is forest planet, city planet, ocean planet, mountain planet. And again, the hierarchy is a little bit forced. I have to force the hierarchy. And again, my friend said, well, city would have to be either number 1 or number 4. But then I wrote back to him and I says, well, it can't really be number 4 because the whole idea about the 4th tier is that it's not really part of the tier structure. It's there as like $100 a month tier, just in case somebody wants to really help out Planet Doug and happens to be a billionaire or a millionaire. And then just in case, who knows, throw it out there. Maybe 2 people will sign up for the Mountain Planet tier, and then that would essentially fund most of Planet Doug. So it's like, well, why not give it a try? Like, have it as an option. So the Mountain Planet is just sort of the highest, the most unattainable. And if you make the City Planet the 4th one, it just doesn't feel special enough, distinct enough. That's where everybody lives. Everybody lives in the city. So it doesn't really work for number 4. And then the first, having it as the first tier, it seems to screw up the hierarchy. Because if tier number 1 is the city planet, well, who's going to move to the forest from the city? Do you see what I mean? It seems like it would go the other way around. Even the way the societies and countries evolve, they start in the forests. They land in like colonizing a new land. It's always a forest or a jungle when you get there. And then you cut down some trees and build a house. And then you take the land that you cleared and you plant crops and you develop agriculture. And then when the society develops, then you build cities. So it always starts with a forest and then it becomes a city. So it feels like a city planet has to be number 2. And that kind of makes sense to me because in terms of my Planet Doug Patreon, I'm thinking about tier 2 as the beating heart. That's the biggest and most important one. So again, my idea, I've gone over this already, but again, I use these BTS journals to sort of develop my own thoughts as well. So I'm kind of thinking out loud. So if I can go through them, the idea for me is the free membership, that's the social media level. So anything I might post to a social media platform, that's available at the free level. So now I'm talking about posting a picture, say to Instagram. Well, instead I'll post that picture to Patreon, and it's available to everybody at the free level. If I have a random thought, something funny or interesting that I stumbled across during the day, it's not connected to any kind of a Planet Doug video, I can just toss it up. It's almost like I have a funny idea and I want to tell my friends about it. Hey, I just saw this great article about this, like a little bit of a funny thing I found on the internet. Like if I was going to post it to Facebook or WhatsApp, well, okay, put it on Patreon, a social media post. And of course, channel updates. So if I make a big decision about Planet Doug, a new country I'm going to visit, something new I'm going to do, anything to do with updates, announcements, information, all of that would go at the free level. Tier number 1 would be that. I'm thinking of that as my journal level. That's where I would post these behind the scenes audio journals, written journals, things like that. So anything on that level, plus a whole bunch of other stuff. But the beating heart of tier 1 would be, of course, all the free stuff. So all the announcements, all the photos, all of that kind of stuff goes on the free level. But tier 1 is all about the journal, in-depth, behind-the-scenes of Planet Doug, plus all the announcements and social media stuff. And then tier 2, that is where all the videos are posted. So you get all the other tiers. You get the journal, you get the social media, but then at tier 2, that's where I would post behind-the-scenes videos, bonus videos, blue dot videos, relive videos, photo montage videos. So all the video content appears at tier number 2, which would be the city planet. And that's where I would want most like dedicated followers of Planet Doug to hang out. So I want to make tier 2 the most attractive one, where you get everything from tier 1, everything from the free level, and all the videos. So that would be the central heart of Planet Doug. That's the one I would focus on. And then the ocean planet and mountain planet above them, they would just be bonus levels, meant mainly for people who want to contribute more. And they're not necessarily looking for a specific reward for doing so. They really want to help me out to a greater extent, and they're happy with the benefits and perks already, but they want to give more, so that would be a higher tier, but I would also give them some perks. So I was thinking for the ocean planet, for example, at that level I would put extended cuts. So quite often I have a Planet Doug video that's, say, 40 minutes long, but I usually have an extended cut that's 2 hours long, and I would put that at the ocean level, because I wouldn't do it all the time. So it would be like select extended cuts. I can't promise to have an extended cut for every single video. I don't have the time to do that. It would take way, way too long. But there would be like the occasional selected extended cut, and 360 videos would be at the ocean level. Again, because I wouldn't be making 360 videos all the time. It would be an occasional thing. So select 360 videos. And then I was thinking POV walking videos, because they're fun, they're bonus videos, but they're also relatively easy to do. So you just put a GoPro on a chest harness and go for a walk. Go for a 20-minute walk through a market. You're not necessarily narrating, you're not polishing the video, you're not editing the video. It's just a walking video as an extra fun thing to do. Oh, I never thought about it until just now. I often like to make time lapses, and wonder where the time-lapse video would go as a benefit or a perk. That could be ocean level as well, or that could be tier 2, the city planet. Yeah, okay. Better make a mental note about that. Time lapses is another bonus thing. So yeah, those are my thoughts about Patreon right now. And yeah, quite interesting, I thought. It was asking people for their feedback was very, very helpful to me. And it made me realize that doing a slow launch, a slow rollout, is a good idea. And I basically asked like 5, I think, friends of mine for their input. 2 of them from North America, 3 of them from, or maybe 3 from North America, 3 from Asia, I think. And it was very helpful to get that feedback. And this is something I think in my life I often forget or overlook, or maybe I have too much ego for that, because I always think, well, I don't know feedback. I don't need feedback. I can think of everything myself. So I'm thinking, well, I can just work on Patreon and I can come up with my own ideas and I don't need help. But then I asked these 6 people for their opinion about one thing, and I learned a lot. Wow, I got so much good feedback, things I never would have thought of on my own, such as how people in Asia, they don't know what a forest is. And then this whole idea of a city planet, this idea of hierarchy. And this is what made me think of this and go off on this tangent. The other thing I learned that was such amazing feedback is that there are people who never even heard of Patreon. It's like, what is Patreon? I've never gone to I don't know what it is. And I kind of went, I mean, I'm so deeply embedded in this world, I just start thinking that, well, everybody knows about Patreon. I mean, everybody must know how it works. So I was thinking in my mind that everybody who watches YouTube videos, everybody who might watch a Planet Doug video, they may not have a Patreon account. They may not even go to Patreon ever. They may never have even seen Patreon, but at least they know what it is, right? Everybody knows what it is. And yet that turns out that's not true. There are people out there who have never heard of Patreon, and even people who have heard about it, they don't know what it is. And then even the people who have heard about it, who know what it is, they don't know how it works. And then even the people who know how it works may not know what it looks like. So I was like, oh, so there's all these different levels of awareness of Patreon itself. And that made me, that taught me a valuable lesson, because I was thinking, you build your Patreon, you make it as good as you can make it. And as I've talked about already, I think it's really important to already have content on Patreon ready to go. So right now I've been spending 2 months building Patreon, adding content to it, so there's something there for people to look at. And I figure, okay, that's enough. And then I can just announce it, launch it, and have a big, grand opening. But I realize now that that's just a recipe for failure, because you're dealing with a lot of people who don't even know what Patreon is. So then I was like, yesterday I had this light bulb went off, and it was like, okay, I have to teach people about Patreon. Not only do I have to open a Patreon and launch it and have content, I have to educate people that it exists, what it is, what it's for, how it works, and what's there. So then it was like, so now I'm starting to think I'm going to use the YouTube community tab and YouTube itself to do a soft, gradual launch. So I'm not going to make Patreon public right away, but what I can do, and I realized this yesterday, all the videos that I posted to YouTube, they're on YouTube right now. They're just unlisted. So the way Patreon works is I guess this is how it works. Even I don't even know. I'm not an expert yet. You upload the video to YouTube. The video is on YouTube like a normal video, but instead of being public, it's unlisted. And then you go into Patreon and you connect Patreon to that unlisted post. So when you go to YouTube, nobody sees that video. It's not there. It's invisible. But when they go to Patreon, now they can see it, and they can click on it, and they can watch that video as if they're on YouTube. But you have to go through Patreon, and the video has to be unlisted. But because the video is unlisted, I can share it normally. Anybody who has the link can watch that video. So what I can do is go onto the YouTube community tab and make an announcement and say, all right, on Planet Doug, I'm going to be opening a Patreon. Tell people what Patreon is, and then I can include a link to something on Patreon, like a video. And this is the kind of content you will find on Patreon. And so I can do this gradually over a month or even 2 months and slowly post links to Patreon content. And people can get little samples. Oh, the blue dot, it's now on Patreon. Relive, oh, it's on Patreon. Oh, look at this, a bonus video in which Doug talks about his new kettle and how wonderful it is. Oh, there's a slideshow about Doug's ferry ride to Sumatra. And I can slowly educate people about Patreon, what it is, teach them how it works, and get them excited about it by showing them the kind of content that's going to be on Patreon. And in that vein, I have to learn about podcasting, because right now all I'm doing is recording these audio files and I upload them to Patreon. And then people can see them on Patreon and play them on Patreon, and you can download them from Patreon onto a device and play the audio. But the only place you can see them is on Patreon. But Patreon has a built-in RSS feed, so I guess you can actually have a real podcast and it will show up in podcast catchers, podcast feeds. But I don't know how that works. I'm very, very confused about podcasts. Seems like it should be really simple, but I don't understand them at all. But YouTube also has podcasts, but I don't know the difference between a podcast on YouTube and a podcast on Spotify. I mean, I use something called, what do I use? I forget the name of it. I should know. Pocket Casts. So I use an app called Pocket Casts, and the Pocket Cast is like an aggregator where you subscribe to a podcast, and then all the podcasts you subscribe to are collected into this one app, and that's how I listen to them. And I use Pocket Casts. A lot of people use Spotify. And I think YouTube is separate from all of them. It's like another podcasting platform that is competing with Pocket Casts and Spotify and things like that, I think, but I don't really know. And of course, a YouTube podcast is supposed to be video, but you can also post an audio podcast without video, but you still have to have a video track. You can't upload audio only. There has to be a video component, but then you can just put in a static image. But I tried working on that in the past, and the problem is the whole advantage to doing audio is how lightweight it is. It's fast and it's easy, and the audio file is small, and you can upload it in 30 seconds and you're done. And a video now is going to be 10 gigabytes big, and it's going to take a long time to export and a long time to upload. And suddenly you have all the problems of video, but none of the benefits, because all you really want are the audio. But apparently there are ways to get around that. But unfortunately, this seems to involve another program where you have to upload your audio to this website, and then they can put in a static image, but the static image is part of the video, but it doesn't create a lot of memory. You don't end up with a 10 gigabyte video. It is a video, it exports a video, but it's very, very small. And I think if you use a normal video editing program and I add in the audio and then I just put in a picture, but the picture is up there for 2 hours as a static image, it ends up being a huge video. It takes a lot of processing power to keep a photo in running in video all that time. So yeah, I don't know how to do this, but it would be a good idea, because if these behind the scenes journals, audio journals, are uploaded to YouTube unlisted, then I can share them with people as well. And I can say also on Patreon, you can find my audio journal, and here's a link to how that works. And this is what it sounds like. So I am going to look into the YouTube podcasting as well and see if I can fold that into Patreon. But more important is this idea that I can do a very gradual, soft launch, teach people about Patreon, educate them, and show them how it works, start directing people to Patreon, and then while doing that, I can give them samples of all of this content that I've been uploading. So I like that idea a lot. And the only reason I even thought of this as a possibility or as a necessity is through asking people for feedback. So it teaches me that that is extremely important to do. So the next big topic on Planet Doug, and this is perhaps the most important topic. I'm burying the lead here. I probably should have talked about this right away. But one of the reasons I didn't is partially because I wasn't clear how to talk about it. And this is such a big thing, and it's been going on for a long time already, but I just haven't talked about it. And the big news, big, are you sitting down? Are you ready? Sit down, pay attention, don't fall off your chair. The big news is that a Planet Doug subscriber and a mystery benefactor offered to buy me a laptop, which is amazing. So in a very short time, I'm going to have my very first high-powered, dedicated video editing laptop. And that is absolutely amazing. Yeah, the mystery benefactor from the United States reached out, contacted me, and said, well, basically said they're coming to Asia. In fact, I think I can talk about this. I don't think these details matter that much. They're going on a trip all around Asia, and they have a layover in Jakarta here in Indonesia. And they said, well, how close are you to Jakarta? Can we meet up in Jakarta? So we were talking about that. It's actually pretty difficult for me to get to Jakarta. It's not easy. And we were talking about that, and he says, yeah, I'd really like to meet up with you because I would like to gift you and Planet Doug a laptop. And then we were chatting back and forth about this because, I mean, of course, I was curious, like, oh, like, what are we talking about? Because it could have been like an old, like, a lot of people who do not make videos don't understand how difficult it is to edit video and what kind of a laptop you need to do that. You can't just grab any old 10-year-old laptop and think you can use it to edit video. So if somebody happens to have an old laptop sitting around their house and they say, oh, hey, Doug, I heard your MacBook is broken. I've got a laptop you can have. It's an old one that nobody uses anymore. That's wonderful. And that has happened to me, in fact, because I do have a laptop with me right now, the Asus VivoBook that a subscriber from Malaysia gave to me because my MacBook broke down. And his idea was, hey, nobody's using this laptop, and you can use it to edit video, which is amazing and wonderful. But then when I got the laptop, I found out that, yeah, it can't edit video at all. I'm using it for making my Patreon. I'm using it for emailing. I'm using it for everything. It's really amazing to have it, but it can't edit video. And I thought if this mystery benefactor from the United States was doing the same thing and was saying, oh, I have an old laptop in my house, and I thought I could bring it with me to Jakarta and then you can have it as a gift. I would be very appreciative, but I'd have to know, well, what laptop are we talking about here? Because there's no point going to all this trouble if in the end it turns out it's a 10-year-old student-level Dell that barely runs, has no memory, and can't edit video. Then it's not worth it to me. But as I was chatting with him, he says, no, 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 no. I want to buy you a brand new laptop. And I guess at the time in the United States, there were all kinds of sales going on. So he was sending me examples, like links saying, like, I can get you this laptop or this one, and what about this one? And he was sending me links to these videos that he could get at a good price at that time in the United States. Anyway, we were chatting back and forth for a long time, exchanging ideas, talking about laptops. And between the two of us, we eventually settled on one. And I am so excited about this laptop. I can't tell you how excited this is. And I'm currently, well, the laptop exists. We chose a model. It's real. It is the Asus TUF A16 from 2023. And this one is really amazing. It's a gaming laptop. And the thing about gaming laptops is that they need a ton of processing power for graphics. So if you have a gaming laptop, you can guaranteed it can edit video. It has the power to edit 4K video, anything you want. So gaming laptops are extremely powerful. But the problem with gaming laptops tends to be that they produce a lot of heat because they're so powerful, and it needs a lot of cooling equipment and heavy-duty fans to cool them down. And it needs a dedicated GPU, which has their own fans. And I didn't even know anything about GPUs. I didn't even know what they were, to be honest. But I've learned a lot about them lately. And when you take a laptop and you make it powerful enough to run modern games, and you add a GPU and all the fans, and it needs to be very durable because gamers, of course, are beating on their laptops and really going crazy with them. So they're heavy duty, they're military grade, durability, drop tests, all that kind of thing. So they tend to get a bit big and a bit heavy and a bit bulky. So I didn't really consider a lot of gaming laptops because when I picked them up, it was like, whoa, that's heavy. I can't carry that around. But I think this Asus TUF A16 is something of a compromise. It's in between. It isn't an ultra portable. Like when I was chatting with my mystery benefactor about like which laptop are we going to get, we were looking at very, very lightweight machines first, because the obvious idea is that, well, the lighter the better because you're traveling around. You want to have a light laptop. But then as soon as you get into the ultra portables, you're dealing with compromises. So the best, like the really, really good video editing laptops that are in the ultra portable category, they come with a massive price tag. They're super, super expensive. So that puts them out of the running right away. And as laptops get lighter and lighter, they get thinner and thinner, which makes them less durable. They have more trouble getting rid of heat, so they have to start throttling back on the processing power because they can't produce as much heat, because they don't have the fans to dissipate it, and because the chassis is so small, it contains the heat. There's nowhere for the heat to go. And you start losing ports. Because the laptop is so thin, there isn't as much room for USB-A ports, for memory cards, for memory card readers, for all these different things, and you start losing ports. So you're looking for a balance in there. And then in the end, the one we settled on is probably, especially when you think about the power brick, That's always an issue for me with laptops, and laptop manufacturers can be really tricky with this. They tell you, oh, our laptop is so lightweight because it only weighs whatever 1.5 kilograms, but what they don't tell you is that the power cord and the power brick weighs a kilogram all by itself, because they've moved all the power components into the brick. And then it's like, okay, sure, the laptop is 1.5 kilograms, but in fact, you're carrying around 2.5 kilograms once you add in the cord and the power brick. And the TUF Asus A16 is a little bit like that, I think, because the laptop itself, I think, is 2.2 kilograms. And when I was talking with my mystery benefactor about making a choice, I convinced myself that 2.2 kilograms is not that bad, because my MacBook, which I had before, the MacBook plus the power cord was 1.7 kilograms total weight. And then this Asus VivoBook that I have now is 2 kilograms. So if my Asus is 2 kilograms, and my Asus VivoBook, and I'm fine carrying around the VivoBook, and it weighs 2 kilograms, then 2.2, okay, the Asus TUF weighs 2.2 kilograms, that's only 0.2 kilograms more, or 20% of a pound, right? A fifth of a pound. That's not bad, but that's only the laptop. You also have to think about the power brick. And I don't really know how much the power brick weighs, but I have a feeling it's going to be pretty heavy. So in fact, I think this Asus TUF A16 is going to be a little bit heavier than I'd like, but I think I'm going to learn to love it, because as I said, sure, you can get a lighter computer, but even losing half a kilogram from the weight, the price goes up by $1,000, and the durability drops, and the heat management gets worse, all that kind of thing. So, and the screen, I guess I didn't mention that as well. That's a big thing. This thing, because it's A16, that means it's a 16-inch monitor. And my MacBook that I had before was a 13-inch. So really, for a portable video editing laptop, technically a 13-inch would be a better idea, because it's smaller and lighter, like my old MacBook. But man, a 16-inch LCD screen, to have all of that real estate, that's pretty sweet. And this one, the A16, is a 10 by 16. So it has a really nice aspect ratio. So anyway, I'm so excited about this. Yeah, my mystery benefactor put in the order for it. He already has it. And yeah, some of the stats for anyone out there that's really technical, I'll give you the actual stats. So it's the Asus TUF, spelled TUF A16. The CPU is an AMD Ryzen 7. It's not the Ryzen 9 model. Those are much, much more expensive. And honestly, I don't need the kind of power that you'd get with the Ryzen 9. So this is more of a mid-range model. The AMD Ryzen 7 7735HS CPU. And then the GPU is sort of, it's an upgrade over the original. The A16 released with a different GPU, but it's since been upgraded. So the GPU is the RX 7700S V8G. So it has 8 gigabytes of RAM built into the GPU. And the laptop itself is currently has 16 gigabytes of DDR5 4800 RAM, and it's expandable up to 32 gigabytes. And had I thought about it at the time, I might have thought about upgrading originally, like right from the start, up to 32 gigabytes. For video editing 4K video, you probably want 32 gigabytes of RAM. But to be honest, I mean, I've never had a laptop that even had a GPU to begin with. And this GPU has 8 gigabytes of its own RAM. And I've never had a computer with 16 gigabytes of RAM and a powerful CPU. So man, oh man, oh man, I'm already jumping up from like a Volkswagen Beetle to a space shuttle, jumping up to this laptop, to be honest. So I thought, well, this laptop is already so powerful compared to anything I've ever even dreamed of owning. 16 gigabytes of RAM? Okay, that's more than enough. It felt like going up to 32 gigabytes of RAM. Well, that was getting greedy. You know, you don't need it. And the base model comes with half a terabyte SSD, 512 gigabyte SSD, or 1 terabyte SSD, but it has an expansion slot, and my mystery benefactor upgraded it to 4 terabytes. So it has 4 terabytes in 2 separate SSD drives, 2 terabytes each. So man, oh man, oh man, what a laptop this is. It is like a dream for me to have something like this, and I'm so excited about it, and eternally grateful to this mystery benefactor, Planet Doug subscriber, and of course, extremely grateful to all of my Planet Doug subscribers and all of my mystery benefactors who have, over the years, have helped me out so much. To be honest, without the mystery benefactors of Planet Doug, I probably wouldn't be able to do this anymore. I'd want to. I love making videos. I enjoy it so much. It has made my life so much better. I get to meet so many people. My social life has gotten so amazing just because of YouTube, meeting so many people, doing so many different things. I love having the channel. I love making YouTube videos. But from a financial point of view, I probably would not be able to do it, not on my own, because I couldn't afford to replace my laptop when it broke down. I couldn't afford a GoPro Hero 12 to upgrade my cameras, which was done for me by a mystery benefactor. A mystery benefactor from Malaysia gave me the MacBook that I used for years and years and years. That kept the channel alive. Probably wouldn't exist today without that MacBook. I could go on and on. Mystery benefactors have supported Planet Doug and kept the channel alive. And now the MacBook, faithful servant that it was, I mean, I banged away on that thing for 4 years now. Hardcore use on that thing. I don't think any laptop has been worked as hard as I worked that poor 13-inch MacBook, and I guess understandably it's reaching the end of its life. It just broke down, started breaking down, and it broke down again when I was in Malaysia. Broke down in Vietnam, I got it repaired, and then it broke down again in Malaysia. So it seems to be reaching the end of its life. I don't know whether it can be repaired anymore. But now that the MacBook broke down and I don't have a laptop anymore, another mystery benefactor is filling the gap with this incredible TUF A16 from Asus. So yeah, appreciation, tremendous gratitude on my part. And yeah, in a short time, very short time in fact, within the next 2 weeks, I'm going to Jakarta to meet up with my mystery benefactor in person, and I'm going to get the laptop. So that is the big announcement, and what I wanted to talk about a little bit is how this changes my short-term plans, and I need to talk about this as well just to get it straight in my own head, because I'm currently in Tanjung, Balai, Sumatra, and the idea is to go cycling around Sumatra, but I'm taking a detour, and the detour is taking me to Jakarta. So my bike ride is being delayed. It's being postponed. So I'm going on a detour to Jakarta, and then I'm coming back here afterwards, and then I can start cycling. So cycling videos are going to be delayed. And from here in Sumatra, there are two ways that I can get to Jakarta. The most obvious way, of course, is just to fly there from here. But in order to do that, I would have to do a lot of things. First of all, I have to go to the city of Medan. That's where the airport is, the Kuala Namu International Airport. I think that's the closest airport to me that I could use to fly domestically. So I could go to Medan. I would leave my bicycle here in Tanjung Balai. Wouldn't bring it with me because I can't take my bicycle to Jakarta. I could, but that would be just a waste of time and money and effort since I'm just coming straight back. But anyway, so I leave my bike here in Tanjung Balai. I've already spoken to the people at this hotel, and they said, fine, I can just leave my bike here, and I can leave my trailer here, and it'll be waiting for me when I come back. So that's taken care of. So I can go to Medan, book a flight, fly to Jakarta, meet up with my mystery benefactor, fly back to Medan, and then get back here to Tanjung Balai. But in order to do that, I have to extend my visa because my visa is expiring soon. So I have to extend my tourist visa for Indonesia. And then the way the dates work out, by the time I go to Jakarta, come back to Tanjung Balai, a good 30% of the visa is already going to be gone. You only get like 28 days or 30 days, and then I have to get this visa extension, but I'll only have like 3 weeks left on the extension, which doesn't leave me enough time to go on my cycling trip. And that visa expires right in the middle of the Christmas holidays. So I would end up having to leave Indonesia and go to a nearby country like Malaysia right at Christmas time, which is the worst time to travel because everything's full, everything's closed, everybody's busy, and all the flights are full and everything is super expensive. So if I do that, so if I go to Medan, fly to Jakarta, I have to get a visa extension. The visa is going to expire quickly, and then it expires pretty much right on Christmas Day, which is lots of trouble for me. But what I figured out is that I have another option. I can also stay in Tanjung Balai, take the ferry back to Malaysia, and then fly from Kuala Lumpur to Jakarta, and then I can go from Jakarta to Medan and come back to Tanjung Balai. So my route would be go to Malaysia first, then fly to Jakarta. And the advantages to that are many. One advantage is that the ferry is right here. It's in Tanjung Balai. I don't have to travel at all. I can just hop on the ferry, cross over to Malaysia. That's a big advantage for me. I love that boat. It would be so exciting to take another ferry ride. It's easy to do. I end up in Port Dickson. Easy to stay in Port Dickson, to get from Port Dickson to KL. And then it's easy to fly from KL to Jakarta. So that's one advantage. The other advantage, I don't have to extend my current visa. I just have to leave Indonesia before it expires. That would be this week. So if I do this, I'm going to be going to Malaysia on like Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. Not sure. And then I don't have to extend my Indonesian tourist visa. And then in theory, when I fly from KL to Jakarta, I can get a brand new visa on arrival. So I enter Indonesia with a brand new visa. So I get at least a full 30 days. I don't lose a week. And if I can get an e-visa, I can extend it online for another 30 days. So basically, I would be entering Indonesia with a fresh visa starting from zero, and I would have a full 60 days for a cycling journey if I wanted to do that. So those are my options. And oddly enough, I've looked at the numbers, and in the end, it's either the same price or it's actually cheaper to go back to Malaysia, because the flight from Medan to Jakarta is relatively expensive, and the cost of the ferry plus the flight from Kuala Lumpur is less than one domestic flight in Indonesia. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what my plan for today is, to think this through one more time, make a decision, and if I decide to go the Malaysia route, and that's what I'm leaning towards, today I have to book all my flights. I've got to book a flight from Kuala Lumpur to Jakarta, and then book another flight from Jakarta to Medan. Though another crazy option I was thinking about is, out of Jakarta, you can take a boat. There's the Pelni boats, and I was thinking about taking a boat from Jakarta to Medan, and that would be an incredible travel experience. So I was thinking about that as well. But that's a lot of logistics, and I don't know. I think in my life right now, I have enough logistics to worry about. Setting up Patreon, setting up a new laptop, setting up my bicycle, then ferry ride to Malaysia, flights. I don't know. It feels like I've got a lot going on, and then adding, okay, now how in the world do I book a seat or a berth on one of these Pelni boats? And yeah, it's a lot to deal with. And since I'm meeting my mystery benefactor at a very convenient place, basically at a hotel right at the airport. It couldn't be any easier than that, where you just fly into the airport, take a shuttle bus to your hotel, meet my mystery benefactor, have a great time, thank him profusely, get the laptop, take the shuttle bus back to the airport, and fly out again. So it's very, very easy and fast and simple. And do I really want to add the wrinkle of, okay, now how the heck do I get to the dock? Because I won't have my bicycle. I'm going to have to use local transportation. How do you get from the airport to the dock? It's going to be super expensive, probably. How do I book a berth on one of these boats? So, I don't know. That's just a random thought that I've had. So, yeah, great, exciting things happening on Planet Doug. New laptop, plus a detour to Jakarta. And I'm probably going to make a video about this. I'm going to make a video announcement about the detour to Jakarta, because I came to Sumatra to ride a bike, and then suddenly I arrive in Sumatra, and the first thing I do is fly to Jakarta. I have to explain, or actually take a ferry back to Malaysia and then fly to Jakarta. I have to explain why I'm doing that. So, I'm probably going to make a video about that. So, I think that is it for the Planet Doug audio journal for this morning. I have a few other things. Maybe I'll do a very quick pop culture roundup just for fun. I was talking the other day about this weekend. I have an interest in combat sports for some strange reason, MMA in particular. And, because if you get into the world of mixed martial arts and the UFC, it kind of spills over into boxing a little bit. And I really don't like boxing, and I don't like influencer boxing, because we've got this, the big YouTuber, Jake Paul. He's gotten into boxing, and he's having all these big boxing matches with MMA fighters and things like that. And this weekend, well, it was yesterday, it was on Friday, Jake Paul had a bout with Mike Tyson. And I talked about that earlier. And the whole thing just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Jake Paul, he's a YouTuber for one thing. And what's he going to do? He's fighting Mike Tyson, who's basically a retired boxer. He's nearly 60 years old. So it's kind of silly for a young man in his prime 27 years old. Jake Paul is 27 right now. He's in his prime, and for a boxing match, he's taking on a 60-year-old retired boxer. And the only reason they're doing it, obviously, is money. Makes a lot of money. Everybody's going to watch it. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's excited about it. Everybody knows the name Mike Tyson. Tyson fighting again is going to get a huge audience, and they're going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars. And that's the only reason they're doing it, and that doesn't interest me that much. However, because I do follow the sport, I knew the fight was happening, and I knew it was going to be pointless. It was going to be boring. Everybody's thinking, oh, Mike Tyson's going to knock him out with his power. But if you follow the sport, and if you know anything, you know that's ridiculous. There's no way. It's not going to happen. Basically, I knew in advance what was going to happen. The fight was going to go to a decision, and Jake Paul was going to win a decision because he's young. He's 27 years old. He's got cardio. He's got energy. He's just going to dance around the ring and throw out a bunch of jabs and win the fight on points. And that's exactly what he did, and it was really boring, I've heard. I didn't watch the fight, of course. I can't afford to watch these things. I can only afford to listen to podcasts about them and talk about them, and even if I could afford them, I would not buy the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight. That would be kind of silly. But anyway, I've heard it's boring. It was a boring fight. I've watched the highlights, and exactly as I predicted, Jake Paul won a big decision, a lopsided decision, and it was all kind of pointless. And then today, there's a UFC event. Well, today here is Sunday. It's happening on Saturday in the United States, but there's a big UFC event, UFC 309, and it's a heavyweight championship fight between Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. And Jon Jones is the current champion, heavyweight champion, and Stipe Miocic was a previous heavyweight champion. In fact, he was the most successful heavyweight champion in UFC history. He may or may not have been the best fighter at the heavyweight level, but he defended the belt and remained champion because he defended it more often than any other heavyweight fighter. So technically, he is the best heavyweight from the past, and he is the current contender, and he and Jon Jones are fighting for the heavyweight championship. And for me, it's an interesting fight. I don't know what's going to happen. Jon Jones, so far, he's only had one fight at heavyweight because he was always a light heavyweight, 205 pounds. He was always a 205-pound fighter fighting at light heavyweight, and he's widely regarded as the best fighter in MMA ever. He is what they call the GOAT, the greatest of all time. But that was at light heavyweight. And then he moved up to heavyweight, which goes up to 265 pounds. So that's a big difference, 60-pound gap from 205 to 265. So he had to put on a lot of weight. He bulked up, he put on more muscle, put on more weight. And he fought at heavyweight one time. He fought Cyril Gane. It was such a weird scene because this is really getting into the weeds here. But a fighter named Francis Ngannou from the Cameroon, from Africa, he was the UFC heavyweight champion. And he won the belt by defeating other fighters. So he was the legitimate UFC heavyweight champion, but then he quit. He quit the UFC and went into boxing and then joined the PFL for MMA. So the heavyweight champion, Francis Ngannou, he left the UFC and he vacated the belt. So there was no heavyweight champion. And then Jon Jones fought Cyril Gane from France, and they fought for the vacant heavyweight championship. And Jon Jones won that fight easily. I think he won it in the first round. He basically used his grappling and wrestling skills. He pushed Cyril Gane up against the fence, kind of dropped him to his butt, put him into a guillotine, and choked him out. And I guess Cyril Gane is a very good striker. He's very good in the fighting, boxing element of MMA, but he didn't really have any takedown defense. So essentially, Jon Jones took him down, put him in a choke, and won the fight within the first round. It was just easy for him. And he's been the heavyweight champion ever since. But that's the only fight he's had at heavyweight. So now fighting Stipe Miocic is the second defense of his belt, and it's the second true heavyweight he's ever fought. And Stipe, I think he's always fought at heavyweight. He's a big guy, so he was always like 250, 260 pounds when he steps into the ring. And then Jon Jones, he's more of a natural light heavyweight. 205 is a more natural weight for him because he's got a big upper body, but he's got really skinny legs. He's like skinny legs, like a stork. So he doesn't really have the body of a true heavyweight. But Stipe Miocic, he is a true heavyweight. So from that point of view, it's going to be an interesting fight. All the experts, all the betting odds, everybody is predicting an easy win for Jon Jones. And that's probably the smart perspective. He's probably going to win. Stipe hasn't fought for years and years and years. He hasn't fought for a long time, so he's rusty, basically coming out of a semi-retirement. He's older. He's like 42 years old now. So who knows what's going to happen. So I'm interested in that fight. And basically, it's going to be happening, I think, in an hour or so. So I'm sort of following the story online. So we've got, I follow these things online. There's like websites that give all the results for the fights. And yeah, the main card just started. So there's actually 4 fights before the Jon Jones fight. So it's still going to be 2 or 3 hours before the Jon Jones-Stipe Miocic fight takes place. So I've got time. But there's some other really interesting fights for me. To be honest, I've lost track of a lot of the fighters because I don't watch the events anymore. So a lot of the new young fighters, I'm not that familiar with them. But there is a fight between Bo Nickel and Paul Craig. That is an amazing fight. Bo Nickel is this new phenom that just burst onto the MMA scene like recently. He's a wrestling phenom. He has a history of being a wrestling champion. He's like an unbelievable wrestler. Yeah, I think he has like 500 bouts, and he pretty much won 99% of them. And then he moved into MMA, and he's really taken MMA by storm. So he could be a future champion. And he's fighting Paul Craig. Very interesting fight there. And then there's another fight, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. That could also be an amazing fight. Charles Oliveira is my kind of fighter. He's a well-rounded MMA fighter. He's a good striker, but he has an amazing ground game as well, submissions and chokes. And he's also really good with kicks. He can do everything. He can punch, he can kick, he can wrestle, he can submit you. And that, to me, is a true MMA fighter. So I love watching him fight. And he's fighting Michael Chandler. And Michael Chandler is more of a brawler. He's just like a guy who goes in there and starts swinging. And he was he was in a different, he was in Bellator, maybe. I think he was the Bellator champion for a long time. And then he moved over to the UFC. And he never won, so far, he's never won a UFC championship. And he loses a lot of fights, to be honest. Feels like he's lost more than he's won ever since he joined the UFC. But he's still a very, very popular fighter because of his style. He's just a brawler. He's very exciting. I prefer the more thoughtful fighter like Oliveira. But so I think what's going to happen is that Oliveira is going to take him down, choke him out. That's his advantage. That's what he's going to do. And I don't think there's anything Chandler can do to stop him. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. It could be a lot of these MMA fighters that are really good at submissions, a lot of them have stopped using their submissions, mainly because of money. That most people are not into the subtlety of the sport, and they just want to see two guys punch each other and kick each other, and they want knockouts. So when it comes to the marketing and making money, the UFC really pushes the guys that just love to punch. And then if you're a submission fighter, you're not as popular. And then, so a lot of the submission fighters, they don't use that part of their game anymore, and they do stand up. They just stand up and they try to punch and kick. And they do that because they know fans, the average fan, likes that better. And they can make more money, become more popular by doing that. So it's a possibility that even though Oliveira could easily win the fight by taking Chandler down and submitting him, he may say, I'm not even going to try. I'm going to try to win with fighting, with punching and kicking, with striking, essentially. But we'll see. I hope he doesn't. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the next couple of hours, and I'm just going to be monitoring that while I think about how I'm going to get to Jakarta. And then once I make a decision, I'm going to be booking flights. And I find that a really, really stressful thing to do. So I've sort of set aside the whole day to do that. So yeah, pop culture, the fighting going on this week. And the other pop culture item is that I'm finally going to watch The Penguin. I've been hearing a lot of good things about The Penguin. Stars Colin Farrell. I've heard it's good. People are raving about it. It's kind of dark and gritty. And I guess it follows up on one of the Batman movies where Batman defeated some kind of underworld crime boss who ran all of Gotham City. So now there's a power vacuum in Gotham City, and all of the other crime bosses, including the Penguin, are going to fight to see who can take over Gotham City. And I think that's what the show is about. It's not really about Batman. It's about Gotham City, and it's about the struggle for power in the underworld, the crime underworld, because there's a power vacuum. And then it's all following Colin Farrell as the Penguin. I think it might be an origin story, because of course, it's just like the Joker. The Joker wasn't the Joker originally. The Joker was just some guy who had a normal name, and then he transformed into a kind of a Batman nemesis, a cartoon figure, a criminal, basically. And then the Penguin was the same. So I think we're going to start off the show with him as this normal guy, a crime boss, and then as he takes over Gotham City and fights for power, he turns into the Penguin. So I think that's what the show is going to be all about. I'm really looking forward to that. So that's next on my pop culture obsession list. All right, that's it. I've been talking for a long time now, and I'm enjoying this. As I talked about before, these are just audio recordings. I haven't set up a GoPro, and the reason I'm doing that is that now that I've finished recording this audio, I can save it, upload it, and I'm done. And I'll be done with this in 5 minutes. If this was a video, I would have to spend the next day and a half, 2 solid days, like 16 hours of work before I could upload the video. And that may seem ridiculous if you've never done it, but yeah, I've got to edit the video, and I'd probably do some fancy editing a little bit. I set up chapters, I put in graphics, I add a little bit of music. So it might take 2-3 hours to edit the video. Exporting it can take 8 hours. It can take a long, long time to export the final video. If it's a 2-hour video, yeah, it can take 14 hours to export using my old MacBook. It will take the entire night, and then it will take probably a day and a half to upload it because these video files are huge. Audio is so lightweight. So anyway, that's why I'm experimenting with this audio business. And again, a lot of people have told me that with my old BTS videos, they never watch the video anyway because it's just me sitting on a bed. I'm not doing anything and I'm not going anywhere. I wave my hands in the air a lot, and I might show things. If I talk about a camera, I can show it to the camera, but that's not that important. So by not having video, it may be a good compromise. And if I can upload this video to YouTube as a podcast, people can still listen to it on YouTube. They don't have to go to Patreon to listen to it. They can actually listen to it on the YouTube platform. So anyway, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm explaining anyway why this is not a video, it's audio only. So that's it for this morning, shutting down. I got to get busy, got to start thinking, got to start booking flights. And once I do that today, I'll be much happier. I can relax a little bit more. So that's it for the Planet Doug audio podcast, audio journal podcast. Thank you for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed those stories a little bit, and I made your day a little bit better, gave you something to listen to in the background while you're washing dishes or vacuuming the floor, walking the dog, whatever it is you're doing out there in the real world, commuting to work, going to school, going shopping in the market, whatever you're doing. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope to see you back here for the next Planet Doug audio journal, and I'll see you then. Have a good life until then.